Today we'll be discussing the difference between an explicit text evidence and an inference. So why don't we start with explicit text evidence? So explicit text evidence is defined as something that is clearly stated in a text so there is no confusion or questions. And the one thing that you must remember about this is that it is always located directly in the text. I'll show you an example. This example comes from the novel The Paperboy. It says, "Ma'am came to Memphis from Mississippi when I was 5 to live with us and help take care of me, and one thing's for sure, I wouldn't have made it this far without her." Some questions you could get from this are, where did Ma'am come from? Or how old was the narrator when Ma'am came to live with him? Both these questions are considered to be explicit text questions because the answer is found directly in the text. But now that we have an understanding about this, let's look at what an inference is. Inferences can be a little trickier. Inferences are judgments based on reasoning rather than direct or explicit statements. It's a conclusion based on facts and circumstances. It's what you infer out of what the text says. Because these are a little trickier, I'm going to show you a couple examples of these so you can better understand this. This example says, "Advised not to travel alone in temperatures exceeding 50 degrees below zero, the man set out anyway." So what can we infer from this statement? Well, we can infer that the man is stubborn and arrogant. We can infer that he's a risk taker. Or we can infer that the man is in a rush to get somewhere. The reason these are inferences is because it's what we are guessing is happening because of what is going on in this text. It's our conclusion of why he is doing what he is doing. Let's look at another example. This next example is for all you Big Bang Theory fans out there. It's a conversation between Sheldon Cooper and Raj Koothrappali. "Sheldon, I took another look at the board and I realized you were right." Raj, "So you were wrong." Sheldon, "I'm not saying that." Raj, "But that's the only logical inference." Sheldon, "I'm still not saying it." What can we infer from this? We can infer that Raj was right and Sheldon was wrong in his calculations on his board. It's the only logical thing coming from this. Sheldon says, "I took another look at the board and I realized you were right." Meaning Sheldon is wrong, but Sheldon doesn't want to admit it. Therefore, this is the only logical inference. Let's look at one more example just to make sure you fully understand what an inference is. Another example, let's say you come into class and you see me drinking out of this Gettysburg coffee cup. What can you infer from seeing me drinking coffee out of my Gettysburg coffee cup? Take a couple minutes, think about it, and then we'll go on. So what can we infer from seeing me drinking coffee out of a Gettysburg cup? Well, you could infer that I've been to Gettysburg. Maybe it was a gift from a friend. Or we could infer that I simply enjoy learning and teaching history. Or, if you want to get on my plus side, we could also infer that I love drinking coffee, which is true. Before I conclude with this lesson, I want to explain one more thing that goes into inferences. It's called implicit text evidence. Opposite of explicit, but it ties in with inferences. Implicit text evidence is defined as being implied or suggested, but not clearly stated, whereas explicit text evidence, as discussed before, is defined as being clearly stated in that text. Implied and inference, it's tricky because they are almost the same. Implied is implied or suggested, but not clearly stated. An inference is an actual conclusion based on the text given to you. So let's look at this example. The figure stood there, almost as if waiting for me to walk down that alley. I knew that I shouldn't have disobeyed my mom and snuck out. We can imply that it's probably dark out because he doesn't explain if the figure is a he or a she. He probably can't tell. We can infer that he is scared and he's probably alone and unarmed. This is why it's trickier to determine implicit and an inference. But if it is implied or suggested, that is an implicit text evidence. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the differences between explicit text evidence and an inference. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.